Why are you hearing no? I gotta imagine that a few of you, are still doing it the way you've always done it before, and it worked before, but it's not working anymore. And why is that happening? Well, we're going to talk about that today, and I'm going to expose some blind spots. And blind spots are the kind of thing that everybody else seems to be able to see and find, but you can't see them. So, despite this unmasking of our lives and our businesses, frankly, we can't go back to the way things always were before because the ground shifted. And if you haven't, that's probably one of the maybe many reasons that you're hearing no. So stick with me for these next few minutes. I'm going to throw some ideas at you, and perhaps we can do a little bit of brainstorming. So as I mentioned in my entree to this live, it's time for us to step back, and reassess some critical elements. Yeah, and maybe uncover those blind spots. So, the idea here is why? Big question, 3 little letters, and it's a great big question. Why is this happening? And it's really hard to imagine and to really judge if the sound of crickets is any better than that emphatic no, and you're talking to the hand. I mean, one has to ask their audience. Tell me how you really feel. And after all, you got the party going, you got a solution that can't change their lives, but it appears that your pitch has fallen on deaf ears. And deaf ears, you've hummed a tune, you've danced a jig, and yet you're still caught in that blink of an eye scroll, and they just keep going. So let's talk about what some of these problems could be and what they're all about. So if we take a look at what's really happening in the grand scheme, in the world around us, we have what appears to be an unending pandemic combined with an unending war in the Ukraine. Now, what does a war in Ukraine have to do with us on the other side of the world? Well, the Ukraine was, and I hesitate to use the past tense, but it was an enormous breadbasket for the world. So when the breadbasket and the wheat production ceased to exist, there are a whole bunch of implications that are going to follow. And while we have this pandemic that also seems unending, it has stopped production of so many things in factories, in plants, and I don't mean the plants that grow in the ground. I mean the ones that are creating the nuts and bolts of so many industries. So these supply chain issues are being held back, which is also, we've got some big rising inflation. And that is changing how much it costs to eat, how much it costs to house, how much it costs to put gas in our car. And this is all percolating around a looming and dooming, presuming recession. So when we package all this stuff up, the fact is that our customer is probably on the edge of their seats thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So we really have a change in buyer behavior. And if you're not tracking those changes, that's probably why you're hearing either crickets or the deafening sound of no. So I challenge you to think differently. And I want you to think about what the core of your business is, like really get back down to it. And you have an audience that has a problem and you've got a solution. It's really problem, solution, target audience. That's really the essence of your business. Now, you may need to change one of these things. Maybe you still can solve a problem, but it's for a different audience. Or maybe you've got the same audience, but now they have a different problem. And you need to think how you're putting this all together, because the bottom line is that it all resides with your audience. That buyer behavior has changed. So if you're not addressing the change in that buyer behavior, that's probably why you're hearing crickets or the deafening sound of no. Now, we have called this person, this audience, our target audience. They're the people that we're going to put the arrow on and just really focus on them. But in these particular sense of circumstances, it's really tough to know exactly who that target audience is. And as a matter of fact, I thought you might find this kind of interesting, that if we look at Target, the department store, and take a look at who their audience is, we see that Target is the 7th largest retailer in the world, pulling in more than $92 billion in sales in 2020. Now, we were in a pandemic in 2020, so that's really quite amazing. The company operates with almost 1,900 stores in 50 states and employs, let's just see if I can move that. I'm going to stop that just for a second. Employs 400,000 people in the United States. And nearly 8 out of 10 U.S. shoppers are Target customers. So according to this data from an analytics company called Numerato, they found that Target's typical target audience is a white suburban mother between the age of 35 and 44 with some college education or perhaps a 4-year degree, and is part of a household that has an income of $80,000. So the typical customer visits Target every other Saturday or so, and about 21 trips a year, and picks 7 products for a total of about $49 per trip. So this is really interesting data to have about your customer, but it's really what's called demographic data. Although they do know some habits about them, about her shopping on Saturday and buying 7 products for about $49. Now, if we take a look, I went and said, well, how much is the average household income in the United States? And this came from 2022 statistics that the average American household income in 2022 is $87,864. So Target's white female mom essentially comes from an average household, household income of $80,000. But what I thought was even more interesting is that the average American real wage was $67,521 in 2020. So I'm not sure it's growing all that much because we've been in this pandemic for 2 years, almost 2.5 years. And now they say we're being hit with another wave. So heavens only knows what kind of impact that's going to have. But clearly what we're seeing here is if the average household income is $88,000, but the average American annual real wage is about $68,000. Clearly, there's another income coming into that household to be able to reach that $88,000. So we have essentially one full-time worker, one part-time worker. They shop at Target, and they buy 7 products for a total of about, argument's sake, say $50 a trip. So when you think about this, my question to you is this, that if you took a look at who is your customer, do you actually know? Do you actually know who buys your product? And this is absolutely critical in terms of the crickets you're hearing and the no's you're getting. And I'm going to explain this a little bit more here, so stick with me on this. But if you haven't defined your customer, then there's a whole bunch of other things that you can't define as well. So Target, by just very actually calling it Target, has called this a target audience. But and we go on to say that some people say, well, build your avatar. So what is your avatar? Your avatar is your ideal customer. But this is not your avatar. That's not the one we're looking for. What we're actually looking for is an ideal customer. And I think we want to move away from this mindset of target and think about ideal. Who do you want to work with? Who do you want to be in your tribe vibe? And I think that this ideal customer needs to like you. And in fact, they need to really, really like you. And they get that you get them and you get their struggles. So that means you've got to really set out to know your customer so that they can know, like, and trust you. Because without the trust, you're never going to sell anything. And if right now you're hearing crickets or you're hearing no, perhaps your blind spot is you've got the wrong customer and the wrong message, or the right customer and the wrong message, or the right message and the wrong customer. So this is a real time to sit down and think about how this unfolds. Because if we go back to this notion about buyer behavior and these buyer behavior changes, if we actually, let me just pull that one up again here. If we actually look at the things that are affecting our customers right now, rising housing, rising food, rising gas costs, you can bet that their buying habits are going to change. And the fact that Target has been targeting, or their ideal customer is this gal, 35 to 44, who shops on Saturdays and buys 7 products for $49. Maybe that same customer is going to shop every other Saturday and buy 2 products for $20. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that are going to change as current events change. So the whole idea about creating this ideal customer is to be able to flow when as they say, the shit hits the fan and things change. Now, it's, as I said, this customer of yours really wants to know that you know what their struggles are, what's keeping them awake at night. So you need to be doing some research to find out exactly how you're going to help them. And the whole idea here is that it's all about our customers' problems. Even on the sunniest day, people walk around with a universe of problems. So we're not in short supply for problems. What we are is in how we attach the problem to the right customer with the right message. And when you get this formula together, you're going to find that you've, as they say, you've pre-sold what your offer already is. And I can't stress enough that you have this in the right way. We tend to market our solutions when in essence we should be marketing their problem. Because if you can touch them with their problem and come up with some ideas about how to help them through that process, you're going to hear far less crickets and far less noise, and far less no's. So here's what I think your problem is. You're exposing your content, your message, to the wrong audience. And as much as you'd like to be a lead magnet, you're looking for leads. And the big problem is that you don't know who is your customer. And without knowing who your customer is, I mean, I heard this, it's just really wonderful. It's like writing a love letter to whom it may concern. I mean, there's a complete disconnect there. So while this may feel like you're pushing a bit of a rock up that hill, imagine how it can feel when you put all the right pieces in place. Imagine how it's going to feel coming down the other side. So I urge you to think about this differently with a problem, a solution, and who your target audience really is. And if you're really keen to learn about how do you figure out what my target audience is, what your target audience is, what your ideal customer is, stick with me. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story next Tuesday, on a Sticky Tip Tuesday, that really gets into defining your ideal customer because you've defined their problem. Now, your solution is critical, but without defining the problem and without sharing the problem with your ideal customer, you're going to continue to hear those crickets, and you may continue to be talking to the hand because things have changed and you've got to change with them. So as this ground continues to shift, so do you. So I hope you got some ideas from this. At least we shed a little light on your blind spots. So stick with me on Tuesday and I'll talk about this whole idea of an ideal customer with a little more clarity and a story, a little bit of a case study on how this all came together. I'm Darcy from Sticky Bee, and I make it super simple for you to brand you and connect with your ideal audience. Connect with your ideal audience. And I help you to get them sticky, get them stuck, and get them to stay. Like bees to honey. In fact, I can help you get noticed so that there are no crickets and There is no no, except the KNOW. See you on Tuesday. Bye for now. And if you got any questions, just let me know in the comments below.